Can I write a full academic paper that is a paper that can be published in American Law Reviews, where papers range between 30 and 60 pages, within 1 hour, only 60 minutes? It sounds impossible. When I was trained during my PhD and my postdocs, our aim was to aspire to one great paper a year. The fastest, the most prolific authors can write one paper a month, and these authors became world famous to a large extent because of the amount of paper they produce. But what if I told you that you can write a paper that is about this level in about an hour? This at least is a challenge that I put to myself. I try to make this challenge with a new DeepSeek app, which is becoming very popular today. For those of you who follow the news, it created an earthquake that has a strong implication over many, many companies. For example, NVIDIA, that is producing chips, and other companies that developed very, very sophisticated AI models. And this company comes and says, we can do almost the same with a fraction of the cost, a few millions instead of tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars. So I tried to use DeepSeek. I was not able to do it because it was busy. So immediately I shifted to ChatGPT, which I know and I trust. And I also have a subscription there that allows me to ask it many questions without a certain quota. And I try to fulfill this challenge. I will tell you already a spoiler. I did not manage to create a full paper that is ready for the press in 1 hour, but I came rather close, and I will give the details in this lecture. My name is Shai Dotan. I'm Associate Professor of International and Public Law at University of Copenhagen Faculty of Law. And the purpose of this series of lectures is to help you improve your English and your research skills. Now, those of you who watch my videos or who know me personally know that I take my challenges very seriously. That's part of the reason why my trainer forbid me to take more challenges at the gym, like a 1,000-pound challenge, which I found rather easy, but may have caused a slight injury. So I don't do more challenges at the gym. I have to find something to do, and I tried to see if I can write the whole paper in 1 hour. Now, here's my strategy. I tried many times before to ask ChatGPT, Gemini. I tried recently with DeepSeek, produce me a paper. Either I get an answer that says something like, it's a very complicated problem, then we can guide you in a particular direction. So we can write a table of contents for you and give you some sample sections, but we cannot write the whole paper for you. Or they say they will do so, and then I ask for a document, I get a Word document of 3 pages. I say again, I want a paper that is 30 pages long at least. I get something similar. So I'm not getting any progress there. I don't know what is the reason. My suspicion is it is not technological. I think it's something within the limitations or the deliberate boundaries that are set by the programmers in order to, for example, prevent a flood of new papers that could emerge very easily. Why do I say that? Because it seems to me that the new AI tools are able to do all the thinking that is involved in writing a paper. They can organize, they can write in a way that is logical, that is coherent, they can find examples and case studies, they can structure the ideas very well, and yet they would not do so. So I suspect this is not something that we cannot do, this is something that deliberately the programmers are setting the AI tool so that it will not give you that immediately. I'm not sure, but that's my hypothesis. I've also been aware of this company designer that promises to produce books for you within 2 minutes based on ChatGPT. And my guess is that they are just using a program that prompts ChatGPT repeatedly, so you don't have to do that. But I didn't want to pay for them, and I have this minimal subscription for ChatGPT, so I decided I would try and see what I can make of it within the time that I have, only 1 hour. So the first thing that I did was I asked it to write me an abstract, and I wrote the following instruction. I said, I didn't give him a topic, I didn't even give him a subfield. I said I want it to be in international law, and I want it to be suitable for an American law review, let's say top 10 international law review. I don't know if he understands the meaning of that, because there's a certain number of journals like the Harvard Journal of International Law, Yale Journal of International Law, Virginia Journal of International Law, the top 3. There are several other journals. Those who know the field know what I'm talking about. I'm not sure it knows what I'm talking about, and I didn't get any indication that it does, but this is something that I think I try to do to constrain it. I did something more than that. I even chose a paper of mine from 2018. I took the PDF, I planted it, and I said, please write it in this style so nobody can suspect that it wasn't written by me. Whether it helps, I'm not sure. But the next step was I asked it to produce an abstract. The abstract that I got was incredible. It was a really great idea for a paper. And one of the things that struck me as almost uncanny is that the abstract was about a topic that I actually write about now. Not exactly the same, but very, very, very close. At first, I suspected that this is because I asked ChatGPT a few questions about this paper in the last couple of weeks. I don't think that's the reason. I think that, at least from my experience, ChatGPT doesn't remember your previous queries. So my guess is the program is so good that it can give you a good indication of the kind of ideas that Shai Lotan is interested in after reading a paper from his in 2018. Maybe some combination of the two, but the result was absolutely astounding. So abstract is very good. It's written very well. Not exactly the style that I use for abstracts, but definitely something that could pass for an American law review. It's coherent, and the topic, that's the most important part, the topic was very, very good. And that's the reason why I started the abstract first. I wanted to try to guide it towards a topic that I find relevant and interesting. And if I would ask just for a title, I think that it would maybe constrain it in a way that would not be optimal. After the abstract is ready, I said, now give me please 3 titles. I immediately guessed 3 titles with explanations, and then you probably guessed that I would choose which title I prefer. I didn't do that. I told ChatGPT, please choose the title that you think is best. And the ChatGPT chose the title for me. The title is quite good. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of ChatGPT titles. I know that many people recommend to use them, and I think that they are much, much, much better than the average student, and much better than I was, I think, as a beginner, probably for the first few years even as an associate professor. Now I think I'm slightly better, but definitely it will do. So I have a title, that's great. Now comes the most important part. I'm not able to ask it for the whole paper. I don't know exactly why. As I said, I think it's something within the boundaries that are set by the programmers. So I ask it for the table of contents. It gives me a table of contents, which is very, very good. The introduction is divided into subsections. The conclusion is also divided into subsections. This is something that I don't usually do. All the sections are divided into 3 subsections, a very symmetrical structure, almost too symmetrical, one could think. But the quality is very, very good. So for example, if a student of mine would come and would show me this table of contents, as I always ask them before they start to write, I would be more than happy to let them just write on without any further instructions for me, because the level is absolutely great. And note, this is the very, very first trial. I didn't guide it. All this time, nothing comes from me. It wrote the abstract, it wrote the title, it wrote the table of contents, no input from me whatsoever. Besides, here's a general style and one very large field to write on, a field in which there are dozens of good journals. Fine. We move on to the next step. I tell it now, write the first part of the introduction. It writes. I check it thoroughly, write the second part of the introduction. What I did is every time I cut and pasted the title that it gave within the table of contents. So there will be no mistake. I go all the way to the end. I don't write any subtitles in the introduction. I just take it complete, and the introduction is ready. The last part was a part where I need to intervene slightly, because that's the part when there's an overview of the rest of the paper. And it gave me an overview that was too long and was also not in the style that I prefer. So it would be, for example, short summaries of each of the sub chapters, whereas I usually use just one paragraph that gives very, very short summaries, just like one sentence descriptions of each of the chapters. But I just asked it to improve that and said with completely natural language, remember the style of the paper that I gave you, write me a simple overview in this style or something that suits an American law review, and it did it very well. So I'm very happy with the introduction, and all this process, I didn't write down how much it took, but I think in less than 10 minutes, we have an abstract, we have a table of contents, we have an introduction of a very, very high quality with almost no intervention by me. From my perspective, this is already 50% of, maybe not 50%, but at least 30% of the research that is needed to start off a great research project, a great paper. And again, I must emphasize, the paper is on a topic that is relevant, it's interesting, it's about how changes happen in international law from the small behaviors of individuals all the way to large scale changes. Something very similar to projects that I'm working on right now without me indicating that to ChatGPT. And I'm very, very happy with the result. Just to give you a perspective, I've really cut down on my hours of writing now that I'm trying to play with these AI tools and see the limits and benefits and advantages. But I've been a bit stuck with writing my own paper, and I think it's been about 2 months since I've started to play with ideas and get to the level of introduction. The introduction that I have now in my own paper is probably worse in every possible metric. So it's shorter, it's less detailed, it's not as well written, it's not as coherent and as well structured as what I have after 10 minutes. So I've written several books and approximately 50 pages, 50 papers that are published, and I have this experience. Obviously, I wasn't doing that all the time. If I were to do it all the time, I hope that within a day or 2 or 3, I would reach this level. But this is something that I've been stuck with for weeks, and now I could theoretically produce a paper by ChatGPT on a rather similar topic of its own choosing within 10 minutes. And now the name of the game is just to be consistent and to be alert. I take a subsection by subsection, and I say take these subtitles, so sometimes it will be the title, and the subtitle comes after it, part 1A, subtitle. I take the subtitle and ask ChatGPT, now write this. Don't need for further instructions. It would write me a section for a paper. The sections are this time of appropriate length. The quality is rather good. I'm reading them as we go along, and I'm cutting and pasting them to another file where I use some of my simple techniques to just organize the file. For example, take the different parts and put them in the headlines in Word in different stages. All this grows and looks very, very nice. The only problem, in fact, is that there are 2 problems. One is it takes me a bit too long to read the text, and I see the clock is ticking. The other problem is sometimes ChatGPT forgets the style that I asked for. I don't know why. It's pretty annoying, and it's also pretty strange, because sometimes it would, we're doing this subsection by subsection. So the paper has, let's say, 6 sections, each divided by 3, there's 18 sections. Imagine that section 11, it suddenly shifts to kind of a laundry list instead of writing in my style. And I would alert it to that, and it would produce a very good version in the style that I requested just by request. And then number 12, 13, 14, it does it in perfect style. So you just need to be aware of that. I'm reading the sections as I go along. and that takes most of the time, but also I sometimes need to say, this I don't like, you need to improve that. And this is just something that you need to learn to live with when you work with ChatGPT. Sometimes it will not give you what you want, even if you say it very clearly, and even if it says in a very polite Oxfordic English, I've just did what you told me, sometimes it doesn't do that, you have to request it again. But you do a paper slice by slice. By the time I reach minute 40, I realize, first, I am, I don't know, about halfway through the paper. Second, I still didn't tackle the footnotes, which is a whole different issue. I have 20 minutes to go. Remember, a challenge is a challenge. So I say to ChatGPT, here is my Word file that I worked on, cut and pasted by your instructions. Please complete that and complete the paper. Very straightforward assignment, and I give it to it, and I get a result that is not good at all. I would get a tiny fraction of a section from one of the next sections, and a conclusion that is very, very short. Basically, it didn't do almost anything. To its defense, it gave me some kind of a apologetic sentence that says, it's not a full paper, I just noted sections. I didn't see what it noted for further writing. I didn't see any notes on the text. It was just a really bad text. So I'm 40 minutes, and now maybe 42, 43, because it took some time to do that, and I still have to continue to do my best. So I do section by section, and by the time I reach the close to an hour, I see I will not be able to succeed, but I say, let's give it one final push to try at least to elevate this to something close to a full paper. I ask for footnotes. I do it in a very primitive way. So I take the full file again, put it inside, ask for footnotes. I get 3 footnotes. I check them. Not only that, what I expected was 300 footnotes. That's a kind of the scale of what I needed in a full paper for an American law review. The 3 footnotes are useless. It's just like names of treaties, and they're not even in the right place. Complete garbage. So that's not going to work, and I tried to do a little bit more of the sections. An hour is concluded. I failed the challenge. I did not manage to write a full paper in 60 minutes. However, I worked for an extra 30 minutes, and I finished the full text of a paper. Now, in the last couple of years, have most of my footnotes done by students. I write a paper myself. To write a paper of this quality, of this length, would take me at least, under the best conditions, a month. I've just done it in 90 minutes. And I could do it again, and again, and again, in many different subjects. Probably if I practice enough, I'll get to the 60 minutes. So, the conclusion is, I can write a paper without the footnotes in about 60 minutes. Every time on a different topic, and the level is very high. Now, I admit, because I was working under very, very strong time constraint, I didn't have time to read it very carefully. I read the abstract and introduction very carefully. Some of the sections I read much more quickly, and I even skimmed some of them. But the level is very high. The paper gives examples which are innovative and real and up to date. The level of writing is very, very high. Ideas are connected well. I think that if you give me, let's take a footnote aside for a second, but if you give me probably 2 hours, I would write a paper that is far better than most of what is published in, let's say, the top 10 international law journals. Definitely much, much better than any student work, and much better than quite a lot of work that I read of professors in decent universities. I don't think that I could surpass that level to a large extent. So, let me explain. I think that I'm able to produce a paper that as a whole will be better, because even if I try to work for 2 hours and to guide ChatGPT a bit about the style, it's still not ideal. Sometimes, for example, I notice that some sections are ending with in conclusion or in sum, as if it concludes the paper. this was a bit a problem to tie the sections together. Also, I looked, I think there's a little bit of repetition and not enough depth in some of the case studies. ChatGPT is very good in producing case studies that are very short, what you can write in 3 pages, which is fine. And I've used many case studies of this sort in my career, but I've also written case studies that are longer, let's say 10 pages, and get to be much, much deeper. And that I think is a bit difficult to produce, and of course, difficult to slice, because that's the entire technique that is here. But if we take this out of the issue, I think that it's possible within an hour or two to write a very good paper without the footnotes, and then basically you can become easily the most prolific author that ever lived within a matter of weeks and months, and that's just something that is possible to do now. Now, what about the footnotes? So first of all, there are a lot of other tools that I was recommended to use to find sources, and that's something that I can definitely do. I can see that ChatGPT with a proper prompting can make footnotes. It takes a very long time. That's why I didn't do it here in this challenge. But I would say, take this piece of text, add the footnotes. It's getting better. Now, one issue is the footnotes put in a proper technical sense. So there's a number and there's actually leads to a footnote. It's difficult to do that in a Word file. I can try to cut and paste it. I see there's some work that needs to be done here. It's still not that friendly. That's one problem, but it's getting better. The second problem is the footnote in the relevant place? Does it make sense? So is it really something that is contributing to the analysis? And they're not on a very high level at all. That's not the level that I would accept from students that work for me in helping me to write footnotes for my own papers. And of course, the third problem is the problem of hallucinations, which means footnotes to things that don't exist. It would refer you to a paper in Harvard Law Review, 1997, page 553. There is no such paper in this page. It's just an invention. It's an hallucination. And that's also something that is getting better. And I think all these things can be relatively easily resolved. The most important part, obviously, of writing a paper, the part that I concentrated on naturally when people can help me to write the footnotes, is thinking of an idea, elaborating it, thinking of examples, writing it properly. This can be done today by ChatGPT in a very, very, very short time. 1 hour to 2 hours to a full, excellent, innovative new paper. Now, following this experiment, I should really ask myself, what does this mean for my job as a professor? Or in my case, as an associate professor of law. I think that the most intuitive thing that comes to mind is that productivity alone would not matter that much. If you produce hundreds of papers, people would not care so much anymore. And that's something that I think already is true in some respects, because you find sometimes professors that produce hundreds of papers and are not very well respected as incredible intellectuals, because everybody knows that already before ChatGPT existed, there are many, many shortcuts. So you can delegate some of the work to students, sometimes much, much more. You can write many, many papers on the same topic. So quantity is already, I think, in a decline as a metric that grades the impact, the effect, the depth, or the quality of professor compared to what it was maybe before we had Google Scholar and the ability to write very, very quickly with a computer and word processors and so on. So that's just going to make it more pronounced that quality alone would say very, very little. The problem with ChatGPT is not just that here we delegate almost all the work and what I tried, but in my paper that I just produced, I basically dedicated all the work, all the intellectual work that goes in the paper was done by ChatGPT deliberately. That was entirely the idea of the experiment. The problem is also that the quality of a paper can be very good. So I know that some people are thinking to themselves, okay, so all these others that produce so many papers will fall out of the game, but my papers are so original, so brilliant, that nobody will be able to compete with them. My own experience is not, that's not the case. So I've tried many times to ask ChatGPT to give me abstracts. They were very, very good in many topics. Um, they were, as far as I could see, completely novel. They were obviously well written, but they were also very, very high level intellectually. I tried to quiz it with taking an idea that was developed by others uh, um, and, and see if it can reach this idea by itself. For example, if you're dealing with economics, dealing with incentives, dealing with all kinds of ideas that involve some kind of intellectual jump from one uh, uh, assumption to an hypothesis or to a certain argument, and it did very, very well. So I have no reason to think that it can't write actually great papers. So it's not just the fact that the professor can produce papers very, very fast, but can produce papers that are better than they can write on their own. And in some respects, again, the quality that I see here is already much better than most of the work that I see. Definitely by far better than student work, but also better than the work of many, many junior professors or PhDs or postdocs. So why not write excellent papers and then write a lot of them? So it's not just quantity that is not a metric anymore. Suddenly it's also quality that is not a metric anymore. And that's a big problem. You can say that legal scholarship would move towards other avenues where ChatGPT and others would not be so successful. For example, more original qualitative research, a lot of interviews, field work. For example, work in other languages where maybe the machine doesn't know that well. Possibly, I think it would be difficult to compete. The languages issue will be solved eventually. I don't think it will take too long. Collecting new material, yes, I'm all for that. And maybe this is exactly where the field will go. I'm not 100% sure. It's not, I don't have enough information to give this the answer. The only thing that I want to stress is that as good as ChatGPT is now, I think that probably in 5 years from now it will be much, much, much better. So if you're thinking about competing with a level of writing, you can't compete with the speed even today. That's obvious. If you're going to produce a paper in 1 hour, you may be able to compete with the quality of the writing, of the ideas, but not for long. Not for long, because I don't think there's any stopping to this technology, and this phenomenon of DeepSeek just shows that is always a way to make it better, faster. We just began to scratch the surface of what this technology can do, and if a paper now reads like a work of an excellent postdoc, then in 5 years it probably will read better than the best work of the best professors in the field. So again, unless you move to things that require gathering information that ChatGPT doesn't have, you will not be able to compete with its rapidity and quality of writing. That would just be impossible. What will happen in the immediate term, I don't know. I'm submitting a paper to the American Law Reviews this term, as always. Actually, it's about artificial intelligence this time and how it can be used in judging. I'm worried that journals would just be struck with an enormous amount of very well written papers that were written partly by ChatGPT in a way that is impossible to check, and even if you could check that, I don't think you have a policy against it. So that would be a problem to compete in this world when I was still writing this paper in the traditional way. So that's something that can definitely concern all professors who think about being promoted or think about their prestige and their standing, how they can reach that. Because the main tool that was used was actually publishing papers and putting them in good journals, or to some extent publishing books. This was the main thing that we as a community of professors were doing, and that thing is something that ChatGPT can do very, very well now. The thing that is concerns me more nowadays is how to guide students, because here I'm afraid that they will never be able to acquire this skill of writing to begin with. What can I tell to a student who, instead of coming to me meeting after meeting for months, working incredibly hard, 8 hours a day, for half a year, produce a paper where another student would basically, even before even meeting me, write a much better paper using ChatGPT. And I stress that, much better paper, because no matter how talented a student can be, even if it's an MA student, they would not be able to compete with what ChatGPT can produce in an hour with a very, very basic set of prompting. Again, can include the footnotes, things like this, but you get the picture. If in a few hours extra, you can color it up to be something that would be better than anything that somebody can produce in an original paper. And this is something that I think should be a concern to everybody now, because if you speak about the professor and they only care about whether it be a full professor instead of an associate professor or how much prestige we get, that's fine. This is not a crucial issue. But you think about the millions of students that we as law schools are training all over the world, training them to write in order so that we will know how to think. We can fail in our mission if we don't teach them to do so just because ChatGPT seems to do it better. The solution to the first problem, how to rate law professors, and to the second problem, how to guide students, is not something that I can provide on my own. I have a much bigger responsibility for the second question. I have students that I guide, and I try to find the best way to do it with the current technology. But there is one issue that I absolutely have to give my attention to because it concerns me personally, and that's how I can use ChatGPT in a way that preserves my control of my papers, my originality, my authenticity. If all these technical issues that I mentioned in this video would be resolved, and they can be resolved very easily. So instead of 2 hours, it would take me 8 hours, and I produce a paper. What do I do with that? I mean, it's a paper that was written not by me. I don't necessarily agree with everything that appears there. Once you start to push ChatGPT around and try to lead it to a result that you want, that's exactly where problem starts to arise. And that's where it gets more difficult. But unfortunately, that's also where it gets interesting, and that's what I need to do for my research. I need to be able to think about an idea by myself, write most of the work by myself, but use ChatGPT to streamline certain processes that are unnecessarily long and take too much time, or to think about ideas, criticisms, examples, case studies that I couldn't be thinking of my own and make my paper better. I would accept them, check them, see that I'm actually in agreement with them, and then use them in my own paper. How to do that, that's a whole different ballgame. And that's something that I give a lot of attention to nowadays, how I can try to prompt ChatGPT in a way where I'm doing the work, I control it, and not it is controlling me. And that's why I say some people that speak about ChatGPT say it's just like having a PhD student that is your assistant and works for you. That's not true. It can do some of its work, and some of its work it does in a very lousy way. What it is more like is working with an erratic genius that knows much, much more than you, works a million times faster than you, has all kinds of ideas and things they want to stress that are different than you, and now you're its co-author. Now, maybe for some reason you can have a last vote, okay, you have veto power here, but it's still a much, much smarter being than you that you're trying to control. And that's exactly what I find challenging right now. Anything that I'm trying to do seems to hit a brick wall. When I say, okay, I will write myself, well, it's too slow and it's not the same quality. If I'm saying, okay, choose the case studies, or give me potential case studies, it gives me some ideas, and usually I end up choosing the ones that I wanted from before. I don't go after it in the track that it offers, even though I have a strong suspicion that this track will lead to a better paper, but it will not be my paper. So how do we combine our strengths and lead to a position when I'm in complete control, but I use all the benefits that it has to offer in terms of speed and of quality? This is something that I will continue to struggle with over the next months and years. That is all for today. For me, Shai Dotan. As always, please comment on the video if you have any comments, or you can send me an email if you have comments directly to me. You're most welcome to subscribe and to like. And until next time, keep learning.